Alright, so today we're looking at four complex numbers, and that I am learning to solve quadratic equations with complex solutions. And we don't really have any true new notes, and that's just because we know everything we got to do. We know what complex numbers are. We know how to solve quadratic equations. For us, the best way to solve a quadratic equation is the quadratic formula. So go up to the top of your paper and just write your x equals, I'm going to sing it for you like our song does, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Yeah. There you go. So, we now have our quadratic formula. We're looking at the same stuff as we did before with our Unit 3. We know what complex solutions are. So what's a complex number? What does it look like? You got it, a real number with an imaginary unit. So a plus bi is usually what we write, but that's what our answers will look like today. So we're still using the quadratic formula, but our answers will now have the imaginary units in them. So, to start off with, our very first problem is 2x squared minus 3x plus 5 equals 0. Do you all remember the very first step for all quadratic equations, no matter what they look like?
Maybe. Yeah, that's 0.
Yeah, it has to be equal to 0, and it has to look like your ax squared plus bx plus c. Everybody here is correct, just kind of saying different stuff.
Oh, we're already on examples.
Yeah.
The heck?
Now, we match it up. What is our a? 2. So a is 2. What is our b? B is negative 3, and c is 5. So now that we have our a, b, and c, we're going to plug into our formula. I am going to rewrite the formula each time, that way we can see it. So it's your x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now, x equals, what's our b?
Negative 3.
So it's going to be a negative 3. So you guys go make that a positive. Negative 3 makes them a positive 3. So I'm going to go ahead and write positive 3. Alright, plus or minus the square root of what's b squared?
Oh, we're done.
Negative 3, you got it, squared, minus 4 times what's a? 2, you got it, times what's our c? 5. Very good. All over 2 times what's our a? 2. Now we're going to put this whole part without the square root bar into our calculator. Alright, so when you put that whole part into the calculator, we do get, oh, grab my pen again, x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of a negative 31. It is really important now not to put the square root bar in the calculator because it gives us a negative number. If you all remember, this negative number has no real solution because it will give us an error in our calculator. So now we're going to do 2 times 2 is 4. So I cannot reduce the square root of a negative 31. Your calculator doesn't like it. There's no point to do it. However, I now know how to reduce a square root bar that has a negative inside of it. We're going to break it apart into the square root of positive 31 and the square root of what? Negative 1. You got it. Square root of a 31 is not a perfect square, so it doesn't reduce. But what is the square root of negative 1? So I'm actually just going to mark this guy out and say it's going to be I. So in order to write that nicely, square root of 31 times I is going to be I in the square root of 31. So now when I write my final answer, I'm going to say x equals 3 plus or minus I square root of 31 because it's an imaginary unit because it was a negative square root. And the square root of 31 cannot reduce all over 4. And because the square root of 31 could not reduce, that's our final answer. It doesn't go any farther. And also, if you think about 3 divided by 4 doesn't reduce either, but that's as far as we go. Alright, so 2, we have 2x squared equals a negative 32. So, what can we do to solve this one? Transpose. I said it equal to 0 first. We're going to take our minus 32 and make him a plus 32. So 2x squared plus 32 equals 0. And now at this step, I still need my ax squared plus bx plus c. But if you look at it, it only has two terms.
0 would be B.
You got it. So a is going to be what?
2.
2. So a is 2. Oh, didn't mean to grab the x there. So a is 2. B doesn't have a b there, so we put it as 0. So b is going to be 0 because there's no x. And then c is what? 32. And now we're good. We have a, I'll write that out a little bit neater. A is 2, b is 0, c is 32, and we're good to substitute again into our formula. So we're going to get our x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So now we just substitute it in. What's our b value? 0. You got it? So is there such thing as a negative 0? No, so I'm just going to make it x equals 0 plus or minus the square root of, you already told me b was 0, so 0 squared minus 4 times what's a? 2 times c is 32. And now all over 2a, which is 2 times 2. And now we reduce. So x equals 0 plus or minus the square root. And now we're going to put that whole part here into the calculator. So 0 squared minus 4 times 32, 2 times 32. And it gives us what? A negative
256.
256 all over, what is 2 times 2? 4. And with this program, I don't know how to scoot my problem over. So I'm going to come out to the side here and drop it down.
So when we end up doing it the same.
All right, and now because I have the square root of a negative number, that's not a real solution, which means it's going to be an imaginary solution. So I'm going to have to break it apart into the square root of 256 and the square root of a negative 1. So what is the square root of 256? Can I do that? Sure, I think that's right. Check it. Yeah, 16. What's the square root of negative 1? There we go. So I'm actually going to replace my square root of negative 256 with 16i. So it'll be x equals 0 plus or minus 16i all over 4. So now, what do we do? Reduce it. We want to see if we can reduce. So what's 0 divided by 4? 0. I'm not going to show with you. I'm just going to drop down my symbol, plus or minus. And now what's 16i divided by 4?
4i.
4i. And we're done. Oh, sorry about that. Our example 3. Okay, so now, our example 3, we have, all right, for example 3, we got the 9x squared equals negative 100. So before I copy it over, what should we do first? We got transpose negative 100, make them a plus. So we got 9x squared plus 100 equals 0. Same step as before, we want to look like our ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So what's our a? So a is 9. What is b?
0.
You got it. There's no x there, so that means it's 0. So b is 0. And c? 100. And now we're right back to our formula where we plug it in. And now our formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, 4ac all divided by 2a. I was saying it in my head too fast, so minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Alrighty, now we get x equals, once again, I can put there's negative 0, but is 0 going to be positive or negative? Nope, so b is just 0, plus or minus the square root of b is 0 squared minus 4 times a is 9 times c is 100 all over 2 times a, and that's going to be 2 times 9. So x equals 0 plus or minus the square root of, now we put this whole part in the calculator at the same time. So 0 squared minus 4 times 9 times 100. Anybody got that?
Yeah. 3,600. Negative 3,600.
You got, negative 3,600. I put that too close there. So negative 3,600.
Yeah.
And what is 2 times 9? 18. We're all good to go. Now, we know because it's a negative, I'm going to have to break that down. So take the square root then of a positive 3,600. What does that give you?
60.
You got it? So a positive 3,600 gives us a positive 60. And because it was a negative in front of it, that gets a what with it? I. Perfect. Because it's like the square root of negative 1. So that's I. And we're all good to go for that part. Now we're just going to drop down our divided by 18. You got it. So we reduce it again. So can 0 be divided by 18? No, it gives us 0.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
60I over 8.
You got, and because they're both even, that should reduce. So what is 60I divided by 18?
10 over 3.
You got 10 over 3I. Okay, and our last one, example 4, I'm going to slide him over here. Now, before I recopy him over, what should we do first to the original one? You got set equal to 0. So I'm going to transpose my positive 3, make him minus 3. So negative 3x squared plus x minus 3 equals 0. We look at our quadratic form, which is our ax squared plus bx plus c. And now we're good. So what's our a going to be for this one? You got negative 3. Perfect. And b? 1. Awesome, because there's a 1 there in front. So 1 is going to be b. And now c is going to be negative 3. So a is negative 3, b is 1, and c is negative 3. And we're good to plug it into our formula. Last time I'm going to sing it for you. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And now we're good to substitute again. So x equals, it's a positive 1, so if it's negative b, it's going to drop down to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b's 1. So b squared is going to be 1 squared minus 4 times our a is negative 3 times our c is also negative 3 all over 2 times a, which is 2 times negative 3. Once again, we get our x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of, now we put what's inside there in the calculator, 1 squared, oh, wrong button, try that again with the highlighter, 1 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 3.
Negative 35.
You got negative 35. All over, what's 2 times negative 3? Oh, I did write it wrong. Give me 1 second. You all said 5, and then I was looking ahead. So 5, and now 2 times negative 3? Negative 6. So now we got to see if our square root reduces. So think about 35 as it being not a negative. Is 35 a perfect square? No, so it's not going to reduce. But I don't like that negative symbol there.
You got it.
So what do I do for that negative symbol? I'm going to make the number positive. So how do I do that?
35 over 9.
Huh?
35 times 3 1.
You got to be a positive square root of positive 35. Alright, so we got a positive 35 and the square root of a negative 1. So what do we know the square root of negative 1 becomes? I. So to rewrite that, we would just say I and the square root of 35. So now we're going to get x equals negative 1 plus or minus I in the square root of 35, because I don't like that negative symbol in there. It becomes that imaginary unit. And then all over negative 6. Now you can leave your answer there because, as we said before, that doesn't reduce. However, there is one thing, if you did want to see if it could reduce, that would simplify a little bit. Because what is a negative 1 divided by negative 6? A positive 1 over 6. To be plus or minus your I squared of 35 over negative 6. But